The Herk Orion. Is it a good mini PC for you? Is it a good mini PC in general? Let's talk about it. This is a video on the PolyTools channel about this Herk Orion mini PC. Here's a picture of it. And I have been using it for basically almost a year now. So I'm going to consider this the year review because I have been using it almost daily, essentially, except for if I was on a trip. And honestly, I probably should have brought it with me on the trip because it's so conveniently small. Now, when it comes to this device, there is a lot of different capabilities to it, and we'll go over it. There is also a lot of videos already talking about like the different features, and there was like 3D Mark and stuff like that. Not sure if I'm going to go ahead and do all those strenuous tests because you can just watch ETA Prime's video about it, and I can link that down below. I wanted to just tell you what my actual use case experience of it is. Has there been any quirks or anything like that? Welcome back. So in this video, I just wanted to talk about these different quirks and maybe just overall what the process was when using it. Even right now, I'm looking at it and there's hardly any sound emanating from it. And so in a lot of cases, it's pretty quiet. Like right now, I can kind of hear it. Hopefully the microphone can't hear it, but that's because I have, a Windows browser open, Epic Games open, my calendar app, and Obsidian, everything all open up at once. And it's not like I have to worry about the use case of it. For perspective, I built my last PC. It had about 32 gigs of RAM, pretty slow. I think it was like 2866 megahertz. And this is basically double that amount of speed. And then the actual amount as well. So 64 gigahertz of something like 5,000. I can't remember the exact specs. And so the fact that like even the RAM is double the speed. I had 3 terabytes with an SSHD and an old terabyte SSD, M.2, but still crappy one. And now I have a Gen 4, I think, SSD in there, plus whatever it came with, which might be Gen 5, or at the very least, it's Gen 4. And this speed is already a lot faster, probably double, honestly. I think the SSD I had before was 3,000 megabytes per second, like read, and this is like 7,000. So it's just like, woof. Huge amount. So same storage and number, but double the speed. And then the actual octa-core processor, I had a Ryzen 1800X. So I had an octa-core, but it was significantly older. And so just even the newer drivers when it comes to the graphics card too has been a big deal. So my graphics card was the RX 480 overclock 8 gig, which I think technically is better. But considering the performance of the newer drivers, I think is actually a lot more important. And I've seen pretty good results with it. I was even playing Apex on it at some points too. And I didn't have to really worry about it overheating with Apex. State of Decay seemed to be a little bit off. And so I don't have any like FPS counts on here for you, but I'll just tell you what the actual feel like was experience with it. Because I feel like that's kind of important when you're looking at tech reviews. A lot of these tech reviews get very technical. Like here's 54 FPS for this game. At low settings, FSR on, that's great, but how does it feel when you're actually playing it? And if you're not that sensitive to FPS, I mean, I can see the difference between 30 and 60, definitely. But if it's somewhere between 50 and 60, I might notice a little dip, but it's not going to pull me fully out of immersion. It's the dip from 60 to 40 because there's no like free sync on or something like that, or like 60 to 30 kind of thing. That's when I will really start to notice. And so this idea of how you use it is also one thing. And what are you planning to use it for? It has 2 USB 4 ports on it. And because of that, you can use an external GPU. And so that's one of the things you could look forward to down the line if you need to use something else. It doesn't have Oculink, which would have a much bigger bandwidth, but as long as you have something that could also take the pressure off of it, and then the CPU would have a little bit more room to actually push itself because it's not putting all that heat in there from the GPU, internal GPU. And so this idea of how you use it is really important. I've been using it every month since I got it, and I've been using it almost every day. And actually, I kind of just leave it on. And so here are some quirks that I wanted to talk to you about. The first one is that since it's Windows 11 and it's also laptop components, I don't know if it's the same with Windows 11 on desktop, like if you build a desktop per se. But for some reason, sleep does not really want to work. And I think that this is an Windows 11 quirk rather than a Herk Orion quirk. But because it is laptop components, it's propagating that way. So when you put it to sleep, it essentially just locks. It doesn't actually go to sleep, which means the fans are still going, which means if you're in the same room with it when you're trying to sleep, or if you're trying to maybe like keep it quiet while you're using a different computer for recording or something like that, that can kind of kick up every once in a while, the fans. And then every once in a blue moon, I don't know if it was trying to do something in the background, but it would ramp up the fans really fast. And then for a few seconds later, turn it off. And I've talked to the team about it, and they've been very helpful. So I'm not too worried about it. But I also got into the habit of, I think in the BIOS, you can tell it, like, what does a power button do? And so when you press the power button, you can choose whether or not you want it to go to sleep or to hibernate or shut down. And I chose hibernate. And so now when I click it, it basically just puts my PC in hibernate. And besides the Arc browser, which is, again, an issue with the Arc browser, not Herk, the Arc browser, whenever I would put it to hibernate, would lose tabs. I have not had that happen, I don't think, with like Opera or Chrome or other browsers in general. But that was interesting, and that only happened on here. But again, I only ever started using Arc after I got this computer. So that's kind of a situation. But the situation happened because I had to put it in hibernate in order for the fans not to be going while I'm not using the computer. And then beyond that, I haven't really ever heard the fans crank up too high under load. I mean, granted, if I'm playing a game, it's going to go pretty hard, but you're also using headphones at that point, so it doesn't really quite matter. I'm not recording it either at that point. Maybe if I was doing more game streaming, it would be a little bit more annoying, but I could always use this as a streaming PC too, and then use something else for the gaming. You can always play around with it, and honestly, the fans aren't really that noticeable either. And with noise cancellation on a lot of these microphones and recording apps, you could probably get away with it too that way. And then the other thing would be just like, okay, how many ports does it have and how can you actually use it? So one of the major deciding factors that I got this mini PC for is that all the other mini PCs capped out at 4 or 5 USB ports. This one has two USB 3s and one USB 2 on the front, and I believe 2 USB regular like USB A's on the back, probably 3.0, and then one USB-C on the front and back. And so I'm actually able to plug in my light, my camera, my other camera, my keyboard, my mouse, my microphone without just filling up the entire thing and having 1 or 2 left over. And so that's one thing that was a really big deal. And sure, you could use a hub, but a lot of cameras don't like to work with hubs. And so you want that direct connection. Other than that, gaming performance has been pretty nice. I came from a full-fledged desktop down to this, and I was able to game pretty much anything I wanted to throw at it. I mean, I'm not sitting there playing Call of Duty at the highest fidelity, but that's not really what I want to do. I want to play, well, first off, emulation would be amazing on this thing. Between Wii and not would be, it has been. But I mainly play a lot of the easier to run stuff anyways. But even Wii games was running pretty fine. I think I tried Switch emulation at one point and it was fine. And so it wasn't like, super strong when it comes to Switch, but Switch emulation's kind of dead in the water anyways because of what happened. And so it's one of those interesting tidbits where it's like, okay, you got to know what kind of game do you want to play. If you wanted to play at the fullest fidelity, well, a mini PC may or may not be the way to go about it. If I want to play Skyrim at a pretty high fidelity, I could do that. Even the newer versions of Skyrim with mods. But when it comes to something like Cyberpunk 2077, wanted to play that with full ray tracing, that's not what this GPU is for. And even if you use an external GPU, you probably could do it at that point. But if you're going to do that to play a game like that, you might want to see what other options are out there. Although I could definitely see this being the brain and using an eGPU for a big game like that, especially if you got a nice, powerful eGPU. But again, the Oculink versus USB4 dilemma kind of situation. So it's really interesting depending on what your need is from it. All right, as you can see, this is my main driver on my PC. Ignore all the cables. I've been dealing with a lot of tech issues today, which is why I'm using my handheld camera. However, one of the reasons why I got this particular PC is because of all the USB ports on it. I will say today I've been having issues with my USB-C ports, and that's why I'm using a secondary camera, because the Facecam Pro does not want to seem to work with the USB-C. But I will say this Logitech is working just fine, so that's a good start right there. I literally just turned on the computer. I literally just turned it on.
So it all comes down to how you plan on using the computer, and I wanted to continue this video a little bit more because I wanted to talk about just how I've used it and overall really the kind of mentality that I have behind it. I think that the Herk Orion series is one of the best mini PCs on the market. I think it competes with Minisform, and I think there's a lot of aspects to it that other PCs just don't really do. The fact that it has two USB 4 ports, one in the front, one in the back, and so that way you could have an eGPU and an external monitor, that's really great. There's options there. It doesn't have Oculink, but then the thing is with Oculink, it usually takes up one of the M.2 slots on the inside, and that's something more important to me. I want to have more storage. This only has two lanes of storage, 2 slots, but I would rather have 3 if I could have, mainly because I make a lot of content, but I also realize I need to probably back things up more often anyway, so it's probably a good thing. I still have 3 terabytes, so that's nothing to scoff at. And it also came with a ton of RAM too, which is nice. And when it came to support, I mean, the company is still growing, so I'm sure the support's going to get better and better, but anytime I emailed, they'd eventually get back to me and give me some kind of like a BIOS update or something like that. I think they do need to do a little bit better at like doing announcements. I think they do it like monthly or something like that, but they probably should do it like bi-weekly or something, just because there's a lot of people who are interested in the computers and some people have backed them on Indiegogo. And I definitely think that the Indiegogo aspect was a great idea too, because there's a lot of computers like the GPD Win and also just Ioneo who are putting their products out on Indiegogo. So there's people already looking for mini PCs and little small gaming devices. The other aspect, I think it's liquid metal on the cooler or vapor chamber, probably both actually. So it's one of the few mini PCs that can actually handle a lot of heating. And I think that's very interesting. And I think that there's been a few times where it's gotten really hot and that's kind of concerning, but it never really had too many issues from that. It's only crashed ever once on me when it came to gaming. And that was for State of Decay, which is a very broken game. It still is, even to this day. State of Decay 2, I should particularly say. And I was also trying to push the limits a little bit, I think. I think that overall, that was probably more my fault than the PC, because I was trying to push the graphics limits, kind of going like, not ultra, but at least high. And I did play it again recently at a lower fidelity. I did have to turn it down once in the game to like I think low to a couple things. But for the most part, it was all medium on State of Decay 2. But I think that was also the issue. So just either the game crashed or the computer crashed because of the heat. Or both, but the game crashes on me on Xbox all the time, so I don't put that blame on the game, on the computer. I mean, especially since I used to play Apex quite a bit, and I would play Apex at about medium settings. I did notice that there was a bit of consistency issues when it came to the FPS, but again, both of those games are so under optimized that I just can't put the blame on the computer, because I don't know if my old computer was just doing better or if the old versions of Apex were doing better. And so there was a couple times where I was playing Apex and I was like, I can see some screen tearing and it is distracting me a little bit, but I can get back into it. So it wasn't anything enough to where it stopped me from playing or anything like that. And I think I turned VSync on and it made it better, but that did make it a little harder to run. But Apex still again ran pretty fine. I mentioned in the last clip, Skyrim I think will be great. I had this idea actually because I've been wanting to play Skyrim on my TV. There's a difference between sitting here at your desk setup and sitting on a couch with a controller playing a game. And I really like the idea of playing Skyrim 1080p, maybe even 4K if it can handle it, with a ton of mods and the ambient lighting around, and you're just sitting there immersed into the world. And I think that would be a lot of fun, just the mod Skyrim Hell and Back. And like the best way to do that is with an HD PC. And I used to love building those, but they're still pretty big. Even my main computer was pretty big. And I thought this idea of, what if I brought this little mini PC here? I get like the Xbox Connect, which works as a webcam, put that in the front of the TV there, and actually stream myself playing it. I might have to still use another computer to do the streaming part so I can focus purely on the 4K Skyrim. Because I'm pretty sure this could probably handle 4K Skyrim, just because Skyrim's so not demanding at this point nowadays. And so this idea of gaming, and I definitely played a lot of different emulation on there too. And there's also some really cool things with Home Assistant that I wanted to try with it, and maybe with the Pulsar unit I have there too. So expect a video about that here soon. If you have any questions or comments, let me know. Once again, this is the review, 1-year review of the Herk Orion Mega. And so if you have a lower tier unit, I would be very interested to see what your thoughts are, because it's basically the same outside shell, I think, for the most part. Same USB ports, just weaker CPU. So I'd be very curious to see what you guys have experienced. So leave those comments down below. Thank you.